Graduate Research. We're going to start our afternoon podium presentations. Our first speaker, of course, you've seen her up here on and off throughout the day, is going to be Michelle Vasquez. Her research is entitled Digital Storytelling for Social Change, Amplifying the Voices of Parents of Children with Autism Through Action Research. Please welcome Michelle to present her research.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. So I am going to be presenting. It's a 2-year research project that I've been working on with the Action Research Initiative of Health and Wellbeing with the Graduate Studies Program with Dr. Alfredo Ortiz and also Dr. Art Hernandez, in addition to Kimberly Cox has been here with working with us, Jeff Neal, and there have been other students working on different various action research projects. So I'm going to have talk about phase 1 and phase 2 of 2 years worth of work. And starting with who am I? I am thinking about, reflection, whole person, my positionality of who I am. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a digital experience strategy manager, I'm a PhD student, I'm a principal investigator for a grant recipient, as a grant recipient, just recently adjunct faculty member, president of the Doctoral Student Association, mentor, not smallers, board member to a state nonprofit specifically for in Texas, disability communities, advocate for people with disabilities, and lastly, a storyteller. So why is that important? So, I kind of want to reflect a little bit, one of the things that you hear a lot in Dr. Ortiz's class is we're not coming in with blank slates. We have a history of who we are, why we come into the program. And I'm just going to share very briefly my story, so connected to the research that I'm working on now. So next slide, please. This was about 12 years ago. So my son was born. He was 1 pound, 6 ounces in the NICU. And it was a very challenging time. We were told many times he wasn't going to survive day after day. And he was living and breathing. And so we had to fight for him to survive in the NICU. And we had to go fight with, unfortunately, not feeling heard is a huge lesson I learned as a constituent and patient and community member. Not feeling heard in the hospital system, healthcare system was very challenging. Finding a case study online as in a sub group that we found, a support group online, finding a parent had a child survive, bringing it back to the doctor and saying there's a chance, a possibility, what can we do? Being told, we pretty much have called it, there's nothing we can do. And finding nurses that will listen to us, case managers that will listen, anybody that will listen, finally being able to get him transferred to higher level care at Texas Children's Hospital. So if the next slide, please. These gentlemen, they fly all around the world and they pick up sick, fragile babies and they take them to Texas Children's Hospital all over Texas, all over the state, the nation, and even across the globe. So they're called the Kangaroo Crew, and they picked up my son and took him to Texas Children, which is in Houston. Next slide, please. And as we went through long journey of 8 months in the NICU, 3 different hospitals of fighting for care and services. And his doctor, on the top left, is the one who saved his life, reconnected his intestines in 10 pieces that had perforated, getting home back to San Antonio, going through rehabilitation and therapy, OT, PT, speech, having to quit my job, having to be his primary caretaker for the first year and a half before he started school. And I always say it took a medical army to get him to where he's at. And those are some of his NICU nurses. We have neonatologist here. We have clinical trial specialist here, Omega Bin. We have a therapist here. So the journey of 12 years has been very part of my history of who I am today. Next slide, please. And to where he's at now, 12 years old. And one of the reasons that I'm continuing my education too is, and I met with the president of the Autism Society, and this quote really sticks out to me of don't hide your journey, your biggest challenge becomes your purpose. So really thinking about where I come from and what I want to do next. So next slide, please. So how am I connecting the storytelling to research? And I've been saying this a lot, so I'm kind of going to use it here, mother turned researcher, because that's really what happened. And you know this, sister. So when my son was born, Sister Martha and a lot of the UIW community prayed very hard for him. So thank you very much. And you always mention that so, in the sense of remembering how is he doing, and they're always asking me how he's doing. So thank you. So now I have to change kind of my way of thinking of saying, okay, this happened, and understanding the role that I play, but now turning on the research hat of being an academic student, scholar, and saying, okay, but what's really going on in the community, understanding the possessionality that I have, but also coming into the PhD program was very helpful to me to say me and others. So what's going on in the community? And during working with the Action Research Working Group here with UIW, been able to partner with a larger grant with our professors, with Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And the grant that I have is through the Social Security Administration. It's a small grant for graduate students that want to work on research. We work with Policy Research, Inc., and it's called the Adjourn program, Analyzing Relationships Between Disability Rehabilitation and Work. So that's been able to support the research that I've been working on the last 2 years. So next slide, please. So phase one was really, I had started the program in 2020. So there was one of my capstone was really just interviewing a few parents of children with autism and just other disabilities, kind of seeing what's going on, getting into a little lens of that, but then actually working with this working group, able to really push forward, working with we built a small research team that Kimberly again was part of students, and it's discovering SSI benefits, social service support for children with disabilities and action research approach. So next slide, please. So thinking about community-based participatory research, what does that look like? And it's the concept of health from a multidimensional perspective and addressing public health issues in the community. And action research is also the participatory research approach. So focusing on local level problems with anticipation to find accessible solutions to it. It's definitely a collaborative, what we've learned a lot in our courses, a collaborative democratic process with a participatory orientation. So thinking about co-learning, decision-making processes, working together. There's definitely a lot of theory and practice and discovery of finding practical solutions to issues. And it's also reflective processes, as I mentioned, understanding my position, where I come from, who I am as a scholar, a researcher, what I'm trying to do in the community, as Brother Patrick has talked all about, when he gave his presentation. So to explore the real world solutions that impact the lives of people and their well-being. Next slide, please. So introduction to the problem is for many parents of children with disabilities, gaining access to federal programs or support, we know it's going to be life-changing, okay? So the purpose is really to examine the parents of children with disabilities, but in this phase, I decided to focus specifically on autism spectrum disorder and how they find federal programs, social service support to support the community. So some of the background literature, I'm just going to share a few, but 1 in 6 children diagnosed with developmental disability, which is the umbrella of autism as well in the US, and then 1 in 44, which last year was 1 in 54. So it's definitely changed within a year's time. Children have been identified with autism spectrum disorder according to the CDC. 1 in 79 people in San Antonio are on the autism spectrum. 30,000 people diagnosed with autism are living in San Antonio. The average wait time, if you didn't know this, for autism diagnosis can be 1 year to 18 months. So your child that needs early intervention is going to be waiting longer and maybe regressing because they need the autism diagnosis before they can find services. And Kimberly's like, yes. And over 4,000 students are served in Bexar County, which may be higher because the stat was done by a few years ago. So I'd like to find a little bit more information on that. And then the autism population in Texas is growing, population is growing. So they're going to need support and services. And what's happening right now is the number of children with autism can outweigh services, which there's not enough specialists out there. There's not enough developmental pediatricians out there. There's not enough people to diagnose children with autism out there. So that's not good in general, but the wait lists for the services are steadily increasing. The longest wait list, if you don't know this, in Texas, is average I'm going to say 19, it's 15 to 19 years of waiting for state services here in Texas. And those are for, again, class ACOG. If you want to just look up, just Google Texas disabilities waitlist, and you will see all the Houston Chronicle reports and other type of information out there. And so the research questions is, how do parents hear about federal programs or service support? What barriers do parents face in accessing the resources? Are service providers and agencies offering relevant and accessible information? And what does the parents' experience look like? The strategies, what works in gaining access to services? So the methodology, next slide, that we used for this was actually recruiting 12 parents of children with autism, thinking about, we had offered some training, recruited a small research team to work, provided training for both in the sense of understanding terminology, stuff like, background information, gatekeepers. We're working with the small research team, preparation of understanding coding processes and analysis, co-analysis as well. We did a lot of co-analyzing, planning and initial meetings with parents. So making sure that they were understanding of what the project was and what we're going to be working on, which methodology, which I'll get to, is digital storytelling. Had pre-interview with parents to really understand the parents' perspective of what it's like to seek access to support to their children that with autism. And we had some workshops, so becoming a facilitator and everything was done during the COVID. Everything was online. We had to pivot because of COVID. So we had multiple workshops first was understanding what is digital storytelling, which is first-person narrative of helping parents share their story by creating video, narrations, using photography, using sounds. And second, workshops were the video creation process. So we talked about video, what does it look like when in telling your story, and they actually did writing workshops where they reflected on their stories, and we had story circles where they shared their stories, and those were some pivotal moments where the sharing process of connecting with others and understanding they weren't alone in the process. Once we created the videos were created by each and the tools you can see on the side, we use WeVideo, Zoom, Padlet, Microsoft Teams, and Story Center is a wealth of resources if you ever want to learn how to do digital storytelling as a facilitator. We had a parent film screening and we celebrated parents. They shared their stories, and we were able to have really great discussions after the screenings of each video, which were usually 2 to 3 minutes long, each video, based on writing prompts that they had. And then we analyzed and collected data. So if you want to go. So there was different video descriptions. So, based on the writing prompts, so what spoke to them as far as, for example, this first video was fighting for respite care services, a parent struggle and long process to seek access to respite care, paying for high cost of services, a parent's challenge in paying a high cost of therapy, because it's very, very expensive when you have a child that needs medical assistance and other type of support, accessing support in school settings, so challenges within the education system, experience leads to advocacy, hearing my son's first words. That was a really powerful video of a mom with a child that was nonverbal, hearing her son say, "Wake up, mommy," for the first time. And the video was just about her moment and hearing his voice, having a choice in a child's care, and also finding inclusive activities like Kinetic Kids and how that really helped her son develop into who he is now. Next slide, please. So just some screenshots of some of the stories that parents created and based on the descriptions that I shared with you. Next slide, please. One of the stories was a high cost of services. So she explained her story of trying to pay for ABA therapy, which is now, at that time, was not covered by insurance, but is now covered by Medicaid within the last year, which probably took a lot of advocacy efforts from a lot of organizations and people to get that done. But at the time, she described how the cost for services can add up when the insurance is not covered therapy session. And in some cases, insurance covers less than the time required. So your doctor wants you to have 3 or 4 visits of ABA a week. And for example, your insurance will only cover 1 or 2. So what do you do? So those are the concerns that were had at the time. Next slide, please. So some of the findings from the analysis was that just understanding the overall parental experience and access to services. So understanding the healthcare challenges, the parents having to retell their stories to multiple healthcare professionals to try to get a diagnosis or seek diagnosis. We had some parents where doctors would tell them one thing and they'd have to go back to get a re-diagnosis or find another doctor to see if they can get a diagnosis. So retelling their story constantly to medical professionals. Number two is find high cost of services, trying to pay for services, like as the video explained. Three was education, challenging the system, moving school support. We have multiple parents that are leaving their houses and moving houses, moving different school districts, moving across Texas. We had a parent move 10 times across Texas, they're just chasing schools. They're trying to find the right services and support. And for their children, having to hire advocates, and understanding the ARD meetings that are held, or the IEP planning, the jargon, when they're going into the school setting, and the committees with educational professionals. And so it's a challenging system in itself that we could probably furthermore explore. And then employment, parents leaving jobs, changing jobs, needing flexibility, employers to understand that their children have medical appointments and they need the flexibility to take their children to their appointments, and having career changes because maybe one parent was a professional and having to quit her job to stay home to help care for a child and homeschool. Information overload facing, and then also well-being. So being emotionally invested of are they taking time for themselves? So it takes a pressure, a force. It's unsustainable. It's becomes difficult to navigate. It's exhausting. It's just everything here is a representation of that. So if you scroll to the next slide. So parent quote, my doctor didn't tell me, all these professionals that you would think you would have this information. So I'm sitting in this chair and I feel like I couldn't breathe. My shoulders are tight and I was there to pick up my older son. And this lady's telling me all this information, and it feels, I feel this is a release. Oh my God, you called who? So for her, she was saying how she's trying to get information from medical professionals, but she's depending on her peers because the other parents are giving her the information that she's needing at the time. And then this other quote is, I want to say diagnose better, but this one thing that I see is common. It's like getting the right people in the right room to make sure that the best outcome is the best interest of the child. Next slide, please. And if you could tell me where I'm at the time, 4 minutes, okay. Phase one conclusion. So first person narrative stories can serve as a tool to educate service providers. So some of the videos are being used for educational purposes as well. Accessible up-to-date information is important, and digital storytelling offer insights to parent lives. Can you go to the next slide? I'm gonna go pretty fast now. So that was phase one. Phase two, we had a summer session, and this was I think this was just so powerful, was the collaborative statement here based on all the parents that showed up during a summer meeting. We want a community where children feel accepted and understood, not treated differently, a school system that works for all, opportunities for individuals with autism to contribute as members of society, inclusion in the community through education, awareness, understanding across medical education and social integration, healthcare providers that understand the urgency of early intervention and ongoing diagnosis, and people to understand that we are all equal regardless of diverse abilities, and parents working together to take action. So, we also use Padlet a lot to reflect as well with the participants, and everybody again was part of it. Go to the next slide, please. We'll go pretty fast into phase two because I only have 4 minutes. The phase two was really saying like, what's next? We're doing action research, we're taking action. What's next? We continue community-based participatory action research approaches, implement action planning, the cycle, use the produced videos to do action-oriented advocacy opportunities. We wanted to expand dialogue, not just with parents, but actually we're working with School of Nursing Health professions, so pre-med students. So we're looking at the healthcare angle now, focusing on that, saying with community partners and other stakeholders, really understanding what different design methodologies and tools that we can use to really look at emergent research processes and sharing stories, creating digital videos, visual analysis. Next slide, please. So research questions are changed a bit, but just continue exploring and then initiating conversations, more conversations with community and parent advocacy roles, which they're actually starting to see themselves as educators now. So next slide. Community partners, Any Baby Can. If you don't know who they are, they're an amazing nonprofit that helps works with parents and children birth to 17 years of age, medical diagnosis like chronic illness, disabilities, developmental delays, and health risks. Next slide. So right now, recruiting parents. This was at that time. We were doing parent check-ins, planning initiation meeting, connecting with our community. Now we have a community partner, Anybody Can. They're very, very excited to work with University Incarnate Word, and then having training workshops with all the stakeholders, understanding counteractive narratives in the sense of having a negative experience. What does a positive experience look like? And then also we have activities called Rewriting the Script, working with students that are going to become future doctors and therapists in the community, working as well, and having an art gallery. Next slide. So these are the trainings where we had a facilitator come in, and this is an Anybody Can on the right, where they're actually prototyping their own community event. They wanted to have a film screening. Next slide. So give it to them, let them plan it out, the parents, and all of us together, we're going to create community events. And then thinking about this the semester was storytelling, rewriting script, and taking action. So next slide. So this was actually an gallery art walk of parents coming together, UIW pre-health professional students coming together, creating artwork based on parent stories, understanding, listening to parents, and then also reflecting, and parents and students created artwork. And then we had a gallery walk where they walked around and they actually had discussion based on the artwork and the stories. Next slide. And then we took it to San Antonio Children's Hospital. So we have the connection with the Chris Santa Rosa. So we also have to remember that we have a lot of resources here at UIW and connections with partners in the community. And we had art walk where the medical director from UIW came, the dean came, and then we had directors from the Children's Hospital of San Antonio, and we had autism specialists from Children's Hospital come, and they talked to the students and the parents, and we had roundtable. Next slide. And here's some of the artwork. I created this one. Another parent created the one that looks like Goliath. Look at the parents in the front, and in the back, the healthcare system education. This is like artwork represented by students up here in the middle, hearing the stories of parents. A student created that one, said missing artwork, knowledge of autism, because they're like, we didn't know this, like they need to learn. And then we have a parent that created boxing gloves because she's constantly fighting the system, and she created puzzle pieces. So next slide. And then we did during a World Cafe, some of the words that they wrote on the table was they felt inspired afterwards, they felt hopeful, they felt changed, knowledge, empathy, optimist, from this experience. Next slide. So reach out to so these are some things that parents said. 1 minute. Okay. And then next slide, please. So this is about it. So understanding the storytelling. I really want to work on evaluation of story, understanding quality, quantity of story, digital storytelling as a process, collaboration, and also how it can be really powerful to share, and emotional method as well. So I will stop there. Any questions? Because I was told to cut it off.
So are you going to build on this agenda towards your dissertation?
Yes.
So these are pilot study, these data will then inform.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Dr. Sinclair said, are these pilot studies that
building towards an agenda? Is this agenda building towards?
Is this agenda building towards my dissertation? Yes, it is. Because eventually, yes, I want to evaluate storytelling and different methodologies, working with community-based CBPR processes, action research. And if I could add a little autoethnography, I don't know, I'm trying to figure all that out still, because some of it is based on my story. So I'm still figuring out. I'm halfway through the program. So I have a lot of more learning to do. And I would like to get to policy, but as you know, policy could take 10 years, 15 years. So I really have to focus on what I can evaluate now, and then keep building on it,
Lorena asks, is there, when it comes to services for children with autism, that you wish Texas would take notes from?
On an ideal state. So
Yes.
Some of the parents were naming like California, for example. There are some states that they just give them the services. There is no wait list based on income requirements, but Texas has. So probably other states that don't have requirements based on income level, but on needs based. So yeah. Well, Texas, yes. Any other questions? Because I know
Have you seen,
yeah, so
The question was, have you seen a change since your son was younger to now?
so this is just across for the research that I've been working with the parents that we meet with and including mine. I could share a little bit about mine too, but the challenges are change. The challenges are always there, but they change as the child grows. So you're looking, and I've been interested in studying also the time, an early child, a parent with an early child all the way to an adult child, because at the end of the children that are older, that are always need dependent care, the parents are worried about what's going to happen when my child passes. I mean, when I pass, what's going to happen to my child? You know, when they're 18 years old, there's the cliff, they lose services. How is my child going to get a job or have those type of job training that they need to be able to function in society and live on their own? So it all changes based on where their child's at. In the early part, it's like just trying to get access to diagnoses. So it just depends. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next presenter this afternoon is doctoral candidate Mark Alvarez. We're gonna give him a little bit of time to come up here and set up. However, his research is entitled Action Research in Belize. Please welcome Mark as he presents his research.
Good afternoon, everyone, fellow doctoral candidates and professors, and dean of the school and sister. I'd like to present my study, Action Research in Belize. What you have here is the title of Global Aid Consultants, and this is part of the Action Research. It's like an emergent, it's an emergent idea that I have with a fellow doctoral candidate student here, Todd Speer, who's here. But 2016, we entered the doctoral program, the PhD program. And at that time, our first class was the INE entrepreneurship class with Dr. Watkins. And she had asked us to produce a business plan. And so my fellow co-researcher and co-doctoral student, Todd Speer, he had a great idea for forming a nonprofit to work with through our PhD program, through our journey. And the thing is that when you form a nonprofit, it can't just be one person, it takes three people. So it takes a team, it takes a partnership. And with us being partners here in the doctoral program, we said, let's go ahead and try this. And it's really been successful. And I will explain more about Global Aid Consultants at the back end of my presentation. But in the front end, I'm going to talk about action research. Please. Here at Action Research in Belize, the context of the study is grand. If you take a look at if you look at the map, the port of entry is where we had to enter into Belize, clear customs, and then from there get our rental vehicles, and then drive to a phone center and pick up our SIM cards. You need to have SIM cards with you in your phone so that you can actually speak to the other stakeholders and use WhatsApp as well and be an effective communicator. And with that, with your cell phone, if you have a phone that has dual SIMs, the digital SIM for back home, and then your SIM for the country that you're in. Then from there, we had to get permission from the Ministry of Education when we first started our research so that we can do our study. So we had to go to the capital in Belma Pond and drive about 2 hours into Belize, go to Belma Pond, meet the Ministry of Education representative that represented Cortisol, which is up in the north. So we had to do that. There was numerous emails previous just to set up this coordination here, and as doctoral students from UIW. But part of the entry into that was the nonprofit the NGO. So you can see how the NGO, we're leveraging the NGO for access so we can conduct the study. And then from there, we went up and made our way all the way up to the Action Research site in Corzal, Belize, and did our site survey and looking at the schools, because the issue with these schools when they're built is that there's no furniture in them. Right here, look at all the tables and chairs that we have. We have, a board here. Some schools have chalkboards. These elementary schools, the Department of Defense builds them, but they expect the Ministry of Education to fill in the rest. Well, that doesn't happen, and then what happens is the schools become abandoned. But the purpose of my study is just the perspectives of the Department of Defense and the Minister of Education, and the action research, social entrepreneurship, and the action research is how do I solve this problem at the same time for the community. So they're both going hand in hand here. Then we discovered, well, who's going to build? We gotta be able to have someone build these tables and desks for us, and we ended up discovering, well, the Mennonite community built them. And so now we ended up, in the context of our research setting, we had to go to Orange Walk, which is the name of a town and Mennonite community, and we actually established relationships with the Mennonites on and within the community. And we did that again through the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Health. They have a relationship with the Mennonites. So these relationships and using a nonprofit to establish legitimacy, credibility, and trust, that was really helped us with our momentum, as opposed to just coming down into country and just trying to introduce ourselves. And it's a lot more difficult to be left out on a limb. That wouldn't be a surprise. It's just to get ignored. So we were using this as our leverage to get our study, get the momentum going really quickly, so that we can actually be a part of the solution for the Ministry of Education, for the schools and the teachers. How do you end up bringing in desks and chairs so that the school can be functional, and at the same time understand the larger government leader perspectives with the Department of Defense and the Ministry of Education. So here the framework is social entrepreneurship, action research, and grounded theory. I use all three because I felt being a qualitative approach with the transformative paradigm, the critical theory, I needed a grounded theory. I needed Charmai's coding to build my analysis, my data. And then with the action research also was building data too for me. And I'll elaborate that in the next few slides. Next slide, please. So in context here, the little background to the study, there's a large 165-mile border between Guatemala and Belize. And right there, that's a disputed territory. It's still not even guaranteed. It's not there is tension in Guatemala and Belize. And so there's an FHA up there by Corzal. It's a foreign humanitarian assistance school. The Department of Defense builds schools in Central America. They built one there. They also built one right, if you can move this bar back up. And they built one right there in the border at Alma and Mingus, right in the border of Guatemala. So in the big picture, why is the Department of Defense building schools in Belize and Central America? Part of it is because the Department of Defense is establishing stability and presence. And they're doing it through soft power. And it's good in many ways because no one else is building schools for rural communities. The USAID isn't building them. The other NGOs are building. There's no one building them. It's just the Department of Defense. And for the Ministries of Education, for even Guatemala and Belize, guess what? I'll take it. Okay, and I'd be very happy to have a school. It's better than nothing in there. And so it's really a good endeavor. And I believe, from my perspective, we can always make those schools better and help students and help children become better learners with a better school. And in context, as you can see, this is the indigenous society of Maya. And the Maya are still here. They were never defeated. They still speak Maya, and they'll speak Spanish as well. But they're part of it. They're the English. The English colonization brings in brings in all the different groups of people that come in that are part of Belize, and and then from there, Mexico. Guess what? Mexico is telling Guatemala, if you invade Belize, I'm going to invade you and take you. So Mexico, Guatemala, Belize all believe. Well, Mexico believes that Guatemala, Belize belongs to them, and Guatemala believes Belize belongs to them. So you can understand these tensions are. They may seem macro, but they're real. If you just take an example in Europe, Europe's on, with the Ukraine crisis. So these things do happen. And so stability is important. Going down of another interest is with the Mennonites. They came in the 50s, and then you can see the ethnic composition of Belize. Next question, or next slide, please. So with the literature review, I looked at it and said, well, what are these key issues of the military humanitarian assistance? Are we doing more good than is it more helpful than harmful? I don't know. So I had to find out. Also, we're looking at the need to restructure our societies with sustainable development goals. Where big problems require big answers because they're wicked. And I believe that the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal Program is the way to holistically optimize your resources, government dollars, donors' dollars, to make the biggest impact on people's lives. So with that, I captured that, and I captured the other aspects of the triple helix concepts too, to be part of the solution. And action research comes into that play. Action research, the emergent designs, the dynamic sense making, the advocacy, and the empathetic relations. These realms actually play a key role. They were connecting to everything I was understanding in my study, and I just didn't well, now I understand even more. And this is where it's at. Next slide. So with that, going into the to the way everything came out, what you can see here: inductive reasoning, deductive reasoning. Well, it's supposed to be deductive reasoning ground theory, but inductive reasoning for action. Action research is inductive. And then with grounded theory is deductive reasoning. And I wanted to stress that because it helps start to filter, sort the data and actually get it to something that has meaning. How do we make meaning out of everything that we're doing here? Next slide. And so with that, making meaning, the interpretations of the studies is, more school projects increase partnerships that improve relationships with the triple helix of academia, industry, and interagency. And with that, you can build a better Department of Defense foreign humanitarian assistance school with sustainable development. And that's through designs, and they're thinking and designing schools with sustainable development. You do that, you're going to increase influence to leverage your resources and expertise. And who's that from? From the stakeholders, but also from academia and industry and interagencies. All other stakeholders besides just the Department of Defense and the Ministry of Education. We need to bring in more stakeholders into this, and let's make these schools a better school for rural communities. And from there, where you have influence, relationships, self-reliance, and schools in the center. These were the results, the findings from the interviews that the triple helix is involved right in my Venn diagram on the inside. And then on the outside, you can see relationships, influence, and self-reliance. These are all part of my theoretical model. Then connected to my theoretical model are the action and research findings of sharing power. Influence is sharing power is soft power. That with sustainable goals from the action and research findings and the triple helix, that and with global AIDS facilitation, we put that into the theoretical model, and that comes out to the mean making of what we can do with the study, the outcome of the study. This is where I can take it, and in partnership with my co-researcher. Next slide, please. So with global aid, social entrepreneurs is what I like to claim ourselves. We're social entrepreneurs. We have a passion. We have a problem that we're trying to solve, and we want others to also believe in that problem we're trying to solve and support us. So that's about transforming lives through education and health. And that's just how we keep it as simple as possible. Next slide, go back one. I guess those are the school desks that the Mennonites built. High quality desks. In the life cycle of the school, the life cycle of the building is going to last a good 20 years. Next slide. So, right, so the practice and processes with Global Aid Consultants. We work with government. We provide the need for school furnishings and the stakeholders. And this is the action research. These are principles of action research. You have stakeholder participation. It's action focused. We get the research analysis, and we have emergent processes, which is right back to global aid and an emergent process of engaging institutions, triple helix institutions, and engaging sustainable development. Next slide. So again, as global aid, we also work with the United States government and Congress to promote humanitarian assistance. So we don't just, from the ground and the arena to the strategic realm in Washington, D.C., we're advocating for resources for building schools in Central America. Next slide. So our business model is to build up our resources and be efficient and continue improvement. The total cost was $37,000 over the course of the program. That's donor money. I donated myself. We have research assistants that were with us. One of them is my spouse, Ruby Kim, who's right here in the audience. She's done a great job over the 6 years in supporting us. So just say thank you on that part. But this is what it takes. But this is the same thing. If you put in an investment into your education and you have an opportunity to put in another investment into building your own NGO to support your doctoral study, then I do recommend that you follow a path this way in social entrepreneurship as the next level to your study. Next slide. This is everything that we've done as global aid. My co-researcher, Mr. Todd Speer, personally went to Thailand, personally went to Tanzania, and then we've been in Central America and in Washington, D.C. Next slide. So we're at the end of the tax year and you want to get down to the next tax bracket and not pay higher taxes, you can lower your tax rate by donating to Global Aid Consultants. Thank you for your time.
Have any questions in person or online for Mark?
Is that a question or a statement?
Comments?
Sister Martha, would you like to restate it?
I'm going to say, keep it up, keep it up.
Thank you.
That is so urgently needed. And I really appreciated your talking about the framework of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And if we could just get, every child in the world, every university student in the world, every US citizen thinking, let's be for this rather than we're against this, we're against this, we're against this, build towards. So thank you for pretty consistently building towards.
Thank you, sister. I'm only half the story. The other half of the story is my fellow co-researcher and fellow doctoral candidate student, Todd Speer, who will be telling the other half of the story here within a few minutes. Any other questions? We're good. Well, thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Mark, very good. I know your work is, I've actually started about the same time. But I would just ask, what has been most challenging doing action research study?
Right. So the most challenging aspect of doing action and research study is wanting to do more of it, because you're learning every time you look, think, and act. You go through the cycles, you reflect back again, you go, you know what, if I had an opportunity again, I would have done it differently. I would have used a different research tool to capture a deeper sense of the data. Or I would have just had arranged for the stakeholders to be over here with me here I would ask this question more to be more empathetic to see, what really can be done better. So that's the most difficult thing about action research. The challenge is that you want to do it again. So it does take practice, so that you can always do better. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for that great presentation once again. Our next presenter, he's going to switch hats here. You saw him earlier in the day, is going to be Brother Patrick. I'm going to invite him to the podium. His research that he's presenting as a research scholar and student is going to be a qualitative multi-case study on how education stakeholders perceive grade repetition at the secondary school level in Western Uganda. Please welcome Brother Patrick to present his research.
Sorry, one moment. Having technical difficulties.
Take your time.
You want to go? I'm gonna find it. It's right there. There we go. Okay.
Thank you so much for having me here again in a different capacity that I will present prospectus. First of all, I need to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to share my research. It is its initial stage. This is what I defended during qualifying exam. And before we go to the next step, the next slide, I need to give a background on why I chose this topic. I'm Brother Patrick Tumwine, and our congregation runs different schools internationally. And since I come from Uganda, we have schools in 3 countries, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania. I'm a teacher by profession, a registered teacher in Uganda, in the government, but also I have served in different capacities in our education system for the congregation, where I've taught in our schools. I've served as chair board of governors for 2 secondary schools and director for education of Holy Cross schools in East Africa in 3 countries. So coming up with this particular topic, it is through my own experience, looking at different schools, forcing kids to repeat their grades. In British sense, would call it class level. So we can interchange grade with class level. So each school, since they are competing with for national examination recognition at the end of every cycle, we have 2 cycles. For high school is divided into senior 1, senior 4, senior 5, senior 6. At every end of the cycle, there is a national examination that students do, and these schools, they want to keep their percentage pass high. So if you are not a performer, then you are either forced to repeat or asked to leave the school and look for another school. So I'm focusing on how are the stakeholders, especially those representing the government, which would be the principals, the chairman PTA. The PTA is Parents Teachers Association, and the teachers themselves. How do they understand this factor, the grade repetition, and its repercussions, its challenges on the recipients of education, those who are targeted to receive education, who are students? So for Uganda, quality education through the Ministry of Education is looked at as the one that satisfies the needs and enriches the lives of students to make their world better, to change their living conditions. But if you have a number of kids repeating grades, then how are you helping the community through education. Next slide, please. So I looked at the number of literature that would help me understand what is really being faced within the country. But most of the literature that was cited that I really received or I found in Uganda focused more on elementary level. Elementary level where the government decided to start the policy of automatic promotion policy to have no kid repeat the class because the government is paying for tuition for every individual. So examinations would not hold the elementary kids in class. But these are the same kids who go to secondary school and they are subjected to the examination to determine whether you are promoted or not. So much of the studies that were conducted were basically focused on grade repetition in elementary school and why the need for automatic promotion policy, but without reflecting on what will be the repercussion of this particular policy on the subsequent level, which is secondary school that receives the same kids. So that's why I decided to look at for literature from 2002 to the present, more than 15 years, there has been a consistent percentage of repetition. But there isn't anything deeper that has been looked at in terms of how can we eliminate this. Even when now the government is trying to implement the new curriculum, they are just trying to phase out the old one, but still the same problem will catch up with them in the subsequent level, which will be senior 5, senior 6, because they are still using the old curriculum. So that's why looking at the statement of the program with the background that I've given, for 15 years from 2002, without even looking back, the Minister of Education and Sports, which is the government entity that runs our education field, presents this particular data. But there is no consideration in terms of how the parents who are living with meager resources, how they have to pay for the same grade more than once, struggling to pay school fees for their kids that are repeating. How do they consider who determines that the student should repeat? What criteria do they follow? And do they have a common policy, which actually doesn't exist at a high school level, how to determine who repeats the grade? Next. So I came up with the purpose of this study will be to explore the education, stakeholders' understanding of the grade repetition at the secondary school level in Western Uganda. And for me to understand these factors from their own perspective, my central question that we'll be leading will be, what factors do schools consider that contribute towards persistence of grade repetition at the secondary school level in Western Uganda, especially as schools continue to fulfill their mission of education service delivery to the recipients. Next, please. Next, please. Oh.
Research questions.
Yeah, research questions. Thank you. This study will be led by 5 research questions. And since I need to understand from their own perspectives, I'm looking at how do educational stakeholders at the secondary school level in Western Uganda describe the contribution or the contributing factors towards grade repetition within the education system within the area, since I'm focusing specifically on Western Uganda. Uganda has 5 regions. It has Western Uganda, Central, Eastern, West, North. So we have North, Eastern, Central, South, West, and Central. We have five regions, but I'm only narrowing my focus on Western Uganda. And why I'm choosing that, that's where I come from. So it is, I don't need to translate. I don't need a translator to help me translate, But again, I have more experience because I've done much of my education in Western Uganda before I joined Central and then entered into Nairobi for my master's. So the second question is, what are the stakeholders' understanding of the current system for graded repetition? Is it working for them or not, and why? So once they know the factors, do they have really the system that they can hold on to that is specific for every school, or each school creates its own system on determining grade repetition? So that's why it falls into the third question of what is the impact of current system for grade repetition based on all that I will be interacting with, who are my pointers, the participants. And then I'm looking at what is the impact of not having the common policy guiding grade repetition. Because as I said, automatic promotion policy is at elementary level. How about high school? Is there anything that brings them together, which doesn't exist currently? But how do they manage without this particular combining effort in terms of a policy that brings them together? But I'm also inquisitive in understanding, is this persistence of grade repetition brought about by the promoted students from elementary school that have entered into secondary school that are the ones now bringing this, the percentage of grade repetition, because they were not subjected to examination as a criteria for their promotion? Could they be 5 minutes? Could they be the trouble that is bringing up? Next. So I'm looking at this study to benefit the Ministry of Education officials, especially in helping them to know how this particular program is a stumbling block in their implementation of the process. But also looking at the curriculum developers and policy implementers on how it is impeding challenges on the parents, the schools in terms of financial challenges, but also looking at how administrators are raising the awareness of how it is impacting their own school. Next, please. So I decided to consider individualism, collectivism theory, because I'm looking at the interaction of fields, the external and internal interaction, and looking at different cultures created by different bodies that are responsible for education. I'm looking at the Ministry of Education and Sports as the highest body that controls the education in Uganda. But also the Ministry of Education sets the criteria of how who to be promoted after one cycle of education through the National Council, through the Uganda National Examination Board. So it means the secondary schools will be dancing according to the tune of these two bodies for them to determine how their internal culture will help to promote their name, sustain the enrollment, but also compete favorably at the national level as they deliver education through the same curriculum, because we have an umbrella of the same curriculum for all the schools. And then the student is the recipient. So how is the student's culture, the needs, his or her family, how is he or her affected by the influence of the remaining part of the culture? So that's what I'm going to be focusing. Next. So methodology, I will be led by qualitative methodology, because inductively it helps me to explore the phenomenon, looking at the meaning and the context that is given by every participant, because I'm finding them in their own setting to get the real lived experience within their own setting. And as Yin says, understanding the phenomenon based on people's experiential knowledge in their own setting gives you a first-hand information on how to understand the program. So since I will be there, it will be timely because they are within their own jurisdiction as they deliver. Next, please. So I decided to consider multiple case study design, but focusing on an embedded multiple case study design, simply because every school will have different internal subcultures that are influencing how this particular phenomenon is understood, implemented, and acted upon. Because each school serves different communities, but these communities make up Ugandan community as a whole. But seeing that every school has its internal culture, and these cultures have to play within the bigger culture of the Ministry of Education, but also looking at if once I select the participants, gender will also play a role as a subculture within. So every individual that gives the perspective or sharing has something that influences how they look at it based on where they are and how the culture of the school drives them. Next, please. I will use purposeful sampling because I need those who have the knowledge to represent, and also target individuals with first-hand information, as so I can learn from differences and similarities from these. Next, please. As you look at this, I will use 4 tools for collecting data, but also in terms of analysis, thematic analysis will be a lead in terms of understanding what I have received, in vivo coding, memo writing, matrix, cross-sectional, cross-case analysis is very, very important for the design that I have chosen. Very, very important. So that's what I will be focusing more as I go up in terms of memoing and analysis. Next. Those ones are common for all of us, so I can go on. Limitations, as I finish, since I'm focusing on one region of Uganda, other regions may be having a different perspective altogether. I'm also focusing on secondary school, not all the 3 levels, and then time constraints because I'm only currently within the time for my graduation, as I said from the beginning, and just a tip of the iceberg. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions? Dr. St. Clair?
So you're using multiple embedded UIW design. And you said one of the limitations is obviously not going to be generalized results. Are you expecting any transferable result where these embedded cases might translate into lessons learned for other regions in Uganda?
Before, Dr. St. Clair asked if there was any transferable results that he could use in his study.
Thank you so much, Dr. St. Clair, for this great question. Yes, because as I said, we are all the schools in Uganda, especially if not, I would exclude the Cambridge section. We all use the same curriculum developed by the Ministry of Education. So it's a determinant on how it is transmitted. So learning from one region, since they all have the same curriculum, there will be some parts that are transferable to other regions to understand exactly what takes place there, even when their own jurisdiction seems to be different, determined by the culture in which, or the community in which schools are located compared to the Western part. But there will be parts of my research that are transferable.
That would be an instrumental value to case study.
That's right.
Good.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Any additional questions? Comments?
Yes, I have a question, please.
Go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Patrick, for this nice presentation. It's a really interesting topic. I think we face the same problem back home in Libya. So that's my question. I understand because the system in Libya, when you say secondary school, that's mean before the university, before they go to college. So I'm not sure if the system in Uganda is the same. After secondary school, students go to the university after that, right? Also, do you see any statistics that address this issue? I mean, within that region, you are going to study from one school to another school. Also, did you see or look at any reports or any studies regarding the progress of those students who are impacted by grade limitation at university? I mean, those students who impacted by great reputation, does that impact their progress at your university?
Okay, thank you so much. I'll begin with the first observation. For our education system is divided into nursery school at the first level, elementary school, and then high school here would be secondary school. But it's divided. So we do 8, we do 7, 6, 3, which is basic for university. So 7 would be for elementary school. For high school, we do 6, but divided into 2. Senior 1 to senior 4, which will be grade 8 to grade 11. And then grade 12, grade 13 would be senior 5, senior 6. And then you can go to the university. So the last question, basically, since I'm focusing on understanding the perspective of stakeholders from teachers, administrators, and chairman PTA, I've not focused much on how the system that has been set by the government through the Ministry of Education, how it has impacted those who have already gone to the university, because I need first to understand what is on the ground before I see what could have been a repercussion. But intuitively, I can look at those students that pass through the automatic promotion process in elementary school, they have already reached the university. So would be an interesting study to look at how they have performed, which percentage that has fallen out, what is it that we can learn from it in terms of the implementation of the policy, and how we can improve secondary school as we prepare them as a springboard for university education. And what is the purpose that is set by the Ministry of Education in rolling out all these policies to the last point of going to the university? Thank you so much, Sharfadin.
Thank you, Bat.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick, once again for your presentation. Hey, do me a favor, look to your left, look to your right. Say, I go to school with some pretty cool and smart people. If you're online, give yourself a pat on the back. You're still here. You're hanging out with us online. Our next presenter is Ms. LeAnn Dinsdale. She is going to be presenting her research. As she comes to the podium, the title of her research is Teachers Spark Student Success at Alma Mater High School. Please welcome LeAnn to the podium to present her research.
So, you know, in the last week of your qualifying exam, and they tell you that you have to present before you can be a candidate, you're like, oh, really? So I guess I'll present next week. Wouldn't that be great? It'll be fun. And so that's why I'm here today. But then I also realized I'd already done that in a while back, so it wasn't such home. A little background on how this started. And when I started the process of my doctoral journey, which was random, but why are the students at a lower minority inner city school not going on to college or not choosing to continue their education? And I would see kids tell me, you know, it's too far away. I can't. It was really frustrating to me because they were in my class and I knew they were smart enough. But I realized for every kid that didn't go to school, there was probably a reason why they didn't. And that was like way this much research to do, and I couldn't do that. And so in my advanced qualitative class, Dr. Guzman Foster and I were talking, and I was talking about the alumni on our campus and how they just have this relationship with the students that I hadn't seen anywhere else. And she said, well, you know, that'd be really good for research. And I said, oh, you know, I think you're right. That'd be really good for research. So, ta-da. I'm still, you know, trying to really clarify. To me, the problem is the students at our school maybe don't trust themselves or don't advocate for themselves and don't believe that they can go on and do bigger and better. So my process in my mind is that if they can see teachers, or maybe that's why they relate to those teachers, because they did go on and they did do better, but they started to where these kids were from. And they have the same background that the kids have. So I came into the school with really little understanding. I thought students were students no matter where they went to school. And that is not a true statement. There's little differences all along. And I thought my class is the most important thing in the world, and they should listen to me all the time, and they should do everything I tell them to do because I'm smart and then I'm the teacher. After really like 1 year, I'm like, that is not true. I am smart, but there's a lot of other things going on. Did they have food last night? Did they have water last night? Did they get their laundry done last night? And so I kind of had to take a step back and think, well, what is really important? And how can I help these students believe in themselves and believe that they can do something else in life? So it took me like 4 years to really understand the students. And then I figured out these alumni teachers already had that relationship because they've been there, done that. And I started talking to them, and they were sharing their knowledge with me. And I'm like, there's so much here that the world hasn't tapped into. There is all kinds of research about the value of teacher-student relationships. If you don't understand your kids, they're not going to listen to you. They don't care what you know until they know you care. And kind of tying into Michelle's thing, the kids will relate to teachers that relate to them. And so there's studies about urban teachers teaching in urban schools, and there's all of that, but there was nothing about alumni, people that graduated from that school, that come back to that school, that's maybe a little rough around the edges. There's some tough kids at our school. We live in maybe a nice neighborhood, but the nice neighborhood kids wear plaid skirts to school. And so what are those alumni, what do they have in their heads that will be good for the rest of us to know? And so I looked, I'm like, oh, there's got to be something out there. The research is just about teacher-student relationships and how important it is. Kids do better and they don't get in trouble. So, I kind of already figured that out, and it's not always about my class, and they do listen to me. So I want to figure out what is it that the alumni have? What is it that they are offering to the students, and what can they offer to teachers, to the campus, to everybody, to help those students be successful? Because if students are going to school and think they aren't good enough, they're going to self-fulfilling prophecy, and that they won't be good enough because they're going to make sure that whatever they think happens is going to be what happens. I think Melinda said something yesterday about people will mimic what they see. And that really just resonated with me, because I think that's what's going on here. And those kids see somebody that graduated from their school and went on to college and did well and came back at their school. They believe that they can do that. Whereas me from Montana tells them, no, you can go on, you can do this. What do I know? You haven't lived in my house. You haven't walked in my shoes. You have no idea what you're talking about. And so I can make the relationships, and I tell them, I know your background, but I don't think I will ever understand your background because I haven't walked those steps. So I can listen to what they're telling me, and I know that things are going on, but I don't think I will ever understand because it's different from mine. And so I think the alumni have got all of that. They know what the kids have gone through. The one that really is in my mind, and I hope that she will interview with me, is talked about her mom being a crack whore and her having to take care of her children and rescue her mom from the hospital and take care of all of that. And I'm like, what high school kid really should have to do that? And she said, I'm not the only one. And I said, sadly, yes. So, this is all going to my brain and 100 miles an hour, but I'm kind of trying to narrow it down. But what influence do inner city teachers, alumni teachers have on creating those relationships? And what is their impact on student success? And kind of a little side note, what does success look like? Because is success necessarily a college degree, or what is success? And I think, I'm leaving that open to them, but I realize that success can look differently to our students. What influenced the alumni teacher to come back and teach at their alumni? Were they, try to keep it not a yes, no, but how did teacher-student relationships affect them as a student when they were here? And is that a part of why they came back? So hopefully, and then I think the answers to these questions can flip out. Like, this is how we can help kids be successful. That same teacher is a U.S. history teacher, and she has like a 99% pass rate on her STAR exams. And she doesn't get the smart kids, she gets the tough kids. And I think it's because she can talk to them straight up about what's going on and what it's like and how this will be advantageous to them. So qualitative research isn't really led by theories. Your theories come back out of what you do. But these are three theories that I think will kind of pop their heads up as I listen to the life stories of these teachers. You know, servant leaders put the goals of your followers at the forefront. You're there to lead them, to guide them, to help them be successful and keep them from failing. And so Nolan and Richard said that it's authentically concerned with serving the followers. And when I first saw this, I thought, well, that's what they're doing. They chose to come back to their followers. They came back to give back to the people that are like them because somebody probably gave to them. Culturally relevant may tie in, you know, kind of going for that. Students relate to people that look like them and act like them and talk like them. And then self-determination is that people are naturally driven to give to society. We want to give back to people. We want to help people. So if teachers are coming back to teach at their high school, are they demonstrating self-determination theory? And can they get their students to buy into that and get the kids to want to be a teacher and come back and serve their community? This is a part I'm still, I change them like kind of daily, really. The new knowledge and what is it going to change? But I think everybody has a story, and everybody has a story about how they got to do what they're doing. Why did you come to be in a doctoral program? Why are you doing the research you're doing? We all have stories. But I think I'm hoping, looking at the story of the alumni, how they came through the system of our school district and came back to give back to the school district can help the students, can help the teachers, can help the parents, because the parents can look at them and go, no, I know you understand because you were here, but those other teachers out there, they don't understand because they weren't here. So I'm hoping that it's going to strengthen the relationships and how those relationships are built. And I think given an insight to the student lives, this lady really has become my mentor and, reminding me of, remember, sometimes these kids don't have this or they don't have that, and this is what they're looking for from you. And so I think if a teacher has that information, a new teacher would have that information from the start, they could build those relationships and kind of back off of content a little bit, and then the content will come into place as the relationships are there. Because they'll listen to what you say if they know that you care about them. They take my class and they don't like it. They tell me every day they don't like my class. And then they want to know what they can take from me next year. And I'm like, it's the same thing and you don't like it this year. I don't know. I guess I'm a student whisperer. So I'm working on my conceptual framework, but I really in the middle is like, how are those alumni teachers in my mind being more successful with students? How are the relationships built stronger with them, or what are they doing to change that? And why has no one looked at alumni? Why are we just looking at teachers and not alumni as a whole? So what do they do to create relationships that's different from everybody else? And I might find out and I might not. So I chose narrative inquiry because it's really recommended for education. Ben said that research into teaching is best served by narrative modes of inquiry to understand the teacher's practice on his or her own part, or on the part of the observer. So if I'm going to study education and the experts are recommending narrative inquiry as the method, I should probably listen to the experts. But I also think teachers tell stories every day. And so why not take their stories and add value to that and get information that helps everybody else gain from it. Looking at the issue of them becoming teachers and the lives that struggles that they had to become a teacher, and how they're impacting the students in their classroom. I'm a part of the experience as a teacher on that campus and as someone who has learned to build those relationships with students. So I'll be able to intertwine my experience as a teacher and my story somewhat with the narratives of the alumni and what makes them stronger. The alumni story hasn't been told. It's personal insight to the students from the school. And how can those teachers help students be more successful? I'm hoping that there's 6 alumni on campus. I know that I'm pretty sure there's 5, but it's really not about how many alumni I interview. It's going to be the depth of the story and what they have to share about what they did to get there. So I'm going to do interviews, and I think that's actually my next page probably says staff selection. Field questions, and I also want to just observe them, sit in the classroom and observe them with their students, sit in the hallways and observe them with other teachers. How do they interact with people that's different from others? Do they have a different demeanor on campus than other teachers? So I think as much as the interviews are going to be important, I think just physically watching them is going to be important also. Member check with them. The teachers that I'm aware of have different levels of teaching experience and in all different curriculum matter. They have different areas that they teach. So I think that there's going to be a broad spectrum of information to come in. They have different backgrounds in their parenting and why they came to be there. And then, so to take all of that data and say, overall, what does an alumni teacher share with the other teachers on campus? So I will be transcribing, I will be coding, and that's the part I just am so excited to do. Can't hardly wait. It's just going to be awesome. But I think in vivo and descriptive are going to be important. It's going to be important to use their words as they describe the students and they describe their life path and how they got to be there. So pulling out the codes might be a little bit more challenging, but the standard Crestwell's conventional coding, and those codes lead to themes and the themes lead to why the story is there. Ethical considerations, IRB approval from the district to do research there. Confidentiality of all the participants so that they don't know which school it is. Everybody's going to have consent letters just to try to keep it as neutral as possible. Backup passwords. Share findings with really who wants to know. I think other teachers their emotional wellness can be improved because they now have a way how to make things better with the kids. Administrators need to understand that they could reach out to those alumni and get information about how to connect with those kids. And then just scholarly, how are we going to help marginalized kids become unmarginalized? How can we help them improve themselves in life? And ta-da. Question?
Sure.
Yes.
So narrative inquiry, of course, has elements of phenomenology and so all the data points that you're talking about makes sense for the collection. I would also consider how you're going to present data as story, and how many really need to have a deeper dive into. In phenomenology, of course, it'd be like the story about experience, right? You're looking at hermeneutic phenomenology in that sense, but it's that deeper dive, deeper interview, and how if maybe the observations provide some context for the story that you're hearing.
Right.
But how will you, and these are thoughts, you may not have, how will you present your findings as story? And how deeply you dive into it might help you then determine the numbers of participants necessary to collect sufficient data. Does that help you?
Yeah, and that's really kind of rolling in my mind. So, and I think different teachers are going to give different stories. Some may go deeper into the story about why they got there, and others may just go surface and, well, I did this and I did this and this is why I'm here. I didn't really think about why I came back here. And so I'm right now I'm kind of thinking about just as I get all of those together, can I formulate a generic alumni teacher story, that says, oh, these are the valuable things you should pay attention to.
So what you would do in that case is you collect your story, then you would have a synthesis of stories to pull all of that
Right.
together. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because the whole idea of narrative inquiry is to give voice to voices. You're kind of the autobiography, so to
Yes.
speak. Or the biography, in this case, biographer of these teachers, collecting their stories to sort of gain that perspective and insights. You certainly will pull it all together, but keep that in mind as you're thinking about how you're training your data, findings, and pull together that collective story. Because I think that would be that voice would be very important to right now, what seems to be the voices.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Do you have any questions online? Online?
I'm done.
Thank you, LeAnn.
You're welcome.
Oh, congratulations for passing.
Yes, LeAnn just passed her qualifying exam, so congratulations on that as well.
Yes. Yeah.
We've reached the last podium presentation. However, stay tuned because I know it's really good. Our last presenter this afternoon from the Dreben School of Education will be doctoral candidate Todd Speer. His research is going to be part 2. If you heard Mark earlier, it's entitled Helping Stakeholders Understand the Process of Building Schools in Belize. Please welcome Todd to the podium.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today. It's the last one, right? So we're all excited. But my name is Todd Speer. I'm also a doctoral candidate here at University of Incarnate Word, and been in the program for almost 6 years now, so since 2016, like Mark said a little bit earlier. So some of the stuff that Mark said, I'm just going to briefly go over and kind of skip over it quick, but his brief really builds on this, and ours kind of go together. They mirror up really good. But my brief here on that, back to the title though, helping stakeholders understand the significance of building a school. This is important for us to know, but the bigger picture of this is, like Mark mentioned earlier, the Department of Defense and the Department of State are in charge of securing our border, securing the United States. And it's easy to take tanks and airplanes or fighter planes and army men and ships and count that, and we can use these to secure our border, and we can quantify that pretty easily. But if we want to use money, taxpayers' money or other means to build schools, the challenge is what's the significance of that? What does that really mean? And how do we make that meaningful? So that's why for us, me and Mark, being military or coming from, a military career, this is very important for us and also our stakeholders that we work with. Next slide, please. So like Mark mentioned earlier, we started the Global Link Consultants back in 2016. Now it's 2022. And next year, we're really excited. In 2023, we're going to be working in Ecuador. So a lot of this information that you're hearing today, a lot of the research, a lot of the data that we found in our research, we're able to apply immediately for next year's project. And also just want to really hit quickly is that we were able, when we started this, all the theories that we learned in class through our entrepreneurship courses, through Dr. St. Clair's courses, we were able to immediately apply to the Global Link Consultants mission that we were running, and then take what we were doing with the nonprofit, non-government organization and apply it back to the classroom activities. So it worked out really well. Next slide, please. So next slide.
It wasn't.
So like Mark mentioned earlier, we're working in Belize, but if you didn't happen to know where Belize is, it's in Central America. It's bordered by Guatemala, Mexico, Honduras, and also where we were working too is up on the northern border of the Belizean and the Mexican border there. So you might see Home Hunter on Discovery Channel, Home Hunters International, or if you take a cruise, a lot of cruise ships stopped in Belize, but not in the area that we were working in. Also, we look at this as neighbors helping neighbors. So we're trying to strengthen our neighbors. We want our neighbors to be better, to help build a better neighborhood for everyone involved. And that would also help us be more secure. Go ahead. And which turns us to this right here. So we can look at the red dots, right? The red circles. The larger the red circles, the more homicides in that area. And we wouldn't guess this, but where we live, Belize, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, we see in the news almost every night, right? The immigration, the migrants are coming from those areas. They're coming up to our southern border. But this Northern Triangle area is some of the most dangerous. It is known as the most dangerous areas outside of a war zone in the world, and they are at our border. So what can we do to kind of reduce this or help reduce this significant crime or the significant problems? And one of them is to try to build schools. Next slide, please. So that's really the problem here. So we're building these schools, but no one is tracking from the stakeholders' point of view. No one really knows what's the impact on the ground that they're doing. We all think they're doing good things, but nobody has done a study to quantify it or qualify it. So that's what we really want to do. We want to understand the significance and the impact of the school so we can improve the process in the future, because we're going to be doing this for years to come. Next slide, please. So that brings me to my 3 research questions are right here. It's pretty much, how do the stakeholders perceive the new school building? So how do they feel about it? How is the new school impacting the community? And then how can we improve on the process? Next slide, please. And we get to do that in Belize. And we're lucky we get to do that in Belize for the research study because they speak English there. English is the main language there, so we don't have to transcribe or translate any languages. But it's really unique working with the 3 different cultural groups there, the Mestizos, Mayan, and Creoles. And thanks to Dr. St. Clair's cultural understanding class, we're able to better interact and better understand where they come from, because they are very unique in some regards. They're very similar in some, but they're also very different in other ways, where the social distance between superiors and subordinates for the Mestizos and Mayans, they're very hierarchy. When the Creoles, they're very, very low power distance and very religious. And you can see that right away when you're talking with the different ethnic groups, and you can know that. Also, so this photo right here, this is Santa Clara or Santa Rita, I believe. But it's right in Corzo, and it's the birthplace for the Mestizos, where a Spanish soldier came and he earned the respect of one of the Mayan kings, and the Mayan king was able to allow that Spanish soldier to marry his daughter right here at this point. So that was really interesting to learn that, but it really makes sense when you bring this 1,200-year-old pyramid in the background of this photo together with Mestizos and Mayans and how they came together in this area right here. Next slide, please. So the literature review, as with any study, is important. Also, understanding your own personal philosophical worldview. Next slide. And on this literature review I did was on the importance of education, and also how does education relate to crime. We can find many books, or not many, but many articles and many books on it actually. But what you're going to find is does crime help criminals? People who have already been in the systems. If they get educated or go through some type of education system, does it help them decrease crime? Or somehow education in our rural areas or built up areas around the country, how does that help? But nothing specifically in Central America or developing countries of starting education, and what does that do for that area? So we're always looking for more literature to add to it, or if we find anything that we can compile for the study, that would always work out really well. But then I threw in here these 4 themes of educational experience. I think Kim might have been in this class, I'm not sure, but we did this in a classroom exercise several years ago, and 4 themes came out about what it means to have an education experience. And actually later on in my research, those themes did emerge again, but not from this research, but from the one that I'm doing now. Next slide, please. So your philosophical worldview is always important, because the better you need to understand how you can apply what you know to the research and what you can take away from the research. So for my ontology and epistemology, I believe that others, hold a different worldview based on their experiences, and we can all define the truth differently depending on how we see it. And I know Dr. St. Clair did a really good example in one of his classes where he held up the bottle, and we all looked at the bottle from the different angles, and we saw that bottle, or that like a Gatorade bottle, differently. But our experience of viewing that differently was the truth to us. So I think that's a really appropriate perspective to have for this type of research. And then the theoretical perspectives that apply to this research are these right here. The action research, of course, which I'll speak about much more later. Grounded theory, starting from the ground up without going with a hypothesis, but starting from the ground, from the stakeholders, what do they say, and building up on that to create meaning. Document photography, that many say that a photograph is worth 1,000 words. So we can get a clear picture of where we're working, and feminist theory to help out to those that are less heard to be heard. So their voices come forward. These books around the side on the right-hand side right here, they just kind of show some of the books that really had meaningful value to my research dissertation. Next slide, please. And then on my positionality, my personal experience and my professional experience build who I am today. Gant says that it's important for us to know who we are, but it's also important for us to explain who we are to others as role models, because as researchers in the community, as researchers to others, We're going to be a role model, and they need to know where we're coming from. We need to better understand ourselves better, so we can not have a bias or conflict of interest in our research. So from your personal experience, your education, from where you grew up, from early childhood to where I am now, my journey to becoming finishing the PhD program, life events, relationships also play a part of that. But moving around, as far as for your military career, I've had a chance to live from Asia to Europe, all over the United States, work in Central America since the early 90s, and also participate in different types of humanitarian assistance types of missions in both peace and war, and then also starting the Global Aid Consultants as a co-founder. So these things here really define who I am. They really define what I'm taking out of the research and what I can give back to the research. Next slide, please. So discover through qualitative research. So I like to say it's a lot like this photograph right here. Here we are driving in a remote jungle area down a muddy, dirty, muddy road, lots of potholes in it. Could be dangerous, maybe not. Lots of turns in your research. So you're going around the turns, but at the end of it, there's going to be something. There's going to be something specially at the end. You just have to keep driving down that road, going in the right direction, and hopefully you'll finish in a really good spot. And maybe the blue sky ahead is the way that we're going here. So next slide, please. So these two gentlemen right here, they're parents of children that were attending one of the schools. They were our participants and stakeholders, so they were able to answer some of the interview questions. So qualitative research is perfect for this. We want to hear their experience. How do they think that this school is done for their children? Next. All right, and action research design was one of the designs right here. We're on the ground with these guys right here, building their school and working on to fill in the school with the school desk. Like Mark mentioned earlier, that's a Mennonite up there who actually built the school desk for us, and the kid in the school delivering it. Next slide, please. And the timeline here. So we started this in 2020 and we finished in 2022. In September, we closed out the data collection IRB protocol. But during this time, we made 6 trips to Belize. And each of these trips, between each trip and during the trip, like Mark mentioned earlier, we're doing a continuous cycle of plan, act, reserve, reflect, which is a systematic approach, which is right in line with action research. And we do that all the time anyways, and we still are doing that today. Next slide, please. So when we're down there, we collected the data. I collected it through 3 different sources: your interviews, photographs, and documents. And right here, you can see where the interviews for 20 participants, numerous photographs that can help paint a rich picture of the research setting, and then numerous documents that support all for different levels. Next slide, please. So right here, I got the 20 participants lined up from the local level, national level, and international level. And they all participated. They're all participants and stakeholders in the process. So we were able to do this. We did this with them, not on them as research subjects. Next slide. So a lot of limitations and ethical considerations that came up. Of course, COVID-19, and you saw that timeline for 1 year, we couldn't do any travel to and from Belize. Funding is always a challenge, and Mark brought that up a little bit ago. Our cultural understanding is always a limitation. We can study all the culture that we want, but unless you're actually living there on the ground or actually grew up there, you might not fully understand it. And the better understanding or the misunderstanding you have of that culture could definitely affect the relationships you have, which will impact your study. Ethical considerations are all right here, just the usual stuff: IRB approval, consent forms, and then share that power, being respectful to everyone in that area. Next, please. So to increase the trustworthiness of the study, I was able to triangulate the interviews, photographs, and documents, also triangulate local, national, and international stakeholders to make sure they all came together and to make sure that the data that we were collecting was really close on track. We did some member check-in, thick descriptions, use of photographs was done with that. And the research bias is just understanding yourself to prevent any bias that you might have. Next slide, please. So I collected all that data. What's how do we make that data more meaningful? And the next slide. And right here. So we used, I used Charmez's process, grounded theory with Cialdini's 4-step process right here. And you can see the process where we collected the data, goes to codes, categories, themes, and eventually answers a research question. And I'll go over a little bit more of this in a minute. But next slide, please. So like Kim asked a question earlier, what was the hardest part of the dissertation? And I think for me, it's collecting that data, it's collecting those interviews in an environment that you have a good, clean recording that can be transcribed or translated later. Because for about every hour of recording that we took, if it's top left here, I spent over 8 hours trying to just decode it and making meaning out of it. If you look down here at the bottom, I have I had a good transcript. I imported that in a Max QDA, and I was able to code it using descriptive and in vivo coding. And then on the photograph on the top right there, that's how I coded photographs with descriptive coding. Next slide, please. And then identified through this whole process, through the 3 different sources of data, I collected over 600 codes that eventually went down to 30 to 35 categories that went down to 7 themes or 7 findings. And then eventually they were applied to the research question. On the left-hand side here, you can see each of the categories and higher level categories that were brought up. And those numbers there represent the approximate number of codes that correspond to each of those categories. Next slide. So these are the 7 research findings right here. And as we can see, each of these is also corresponded, each of the bullets next to them kind of correspond to the categories that support them. And I just selected 3. Each of them have a various number. But what this really does, it tells the story of the experiences of the stakeholders. Next slide, please. And I'll go over one of these and then we'll skip through the rest real quick. So for this one here, motivation for school, I have the 3 categories below it that support it, and then there's quotes on each side that support each of those categories. And in the bottom, you can see the photos. So with the photo, the community is ready to learn at the bottom left with the children and the school desk easily conveys, why do the new kids now have more motivation to go to school than they did in the past? On the bottom right, you can see the completed schools. The completed schools also disaster and storm resistance. And one of the teachers said, hey, I'm glad I don't have any bugs in my classroom anymore. But that corresponds to a more safe learning environment. Next slide, please. And the same thing here. If you look at the photo, you can just envision the kids sitting in that desk. They have a place to go to school. So it's creating opportunities for them. On the bottom right, the grows the community. It's not only physically grew the community, because you have a nicer school, just like we are in the United States. More people want to move to that community. And while we were there one day, that the principal just came in, they said they were like, we had 5 more families just moved to the community today because of the new school. But that sign, they refurbished and they made that sign nicer and better while we were there also. Next. So we have go one more. So we have all the findings, and now we have to say, what's the value of those findings? How do they all make sense? And they make sense by being put right here. So I was able to answer the research questions with those findings, as you can see on this slide here. But most importantly, after interpreting them and synthesizing them even more, I came up with these 2 theoretical models that actually help explain those findings, which one is what is the immediate impact of the school, and one is how can I improve the process, or what are the key concepts to build in the school. Next, please. And right here, so what are the key concepts that came up to building the school? And it's these right here. It's to build and complete a school. It takes partners with resources who communicate together in an environment they support. Now, there's a whole lot of data and a whole lot of stuff that goes behind these here, but this is basically what it came up with. Mark came up with something similar. And what we can do with these theoretical models is we can apply them in the future when we go to conventions and go to meetings with our stakeholders. But basically, when the new school was built based on this, go to the next slide. The immediate effects on the community is right here. So this is what the stakeholders say that this school did for them right away, which is really important to us. And I think it's huge. And it's kind of like what Laura was talking about earlier today about the human capital theory would fit right into this and our projected long-term impact. So hopefully, if the kids are going to school, they can support themselves. They can support a family, and then they support the nation state. If they can create a better neighborhood with a neighbor, if we create a better neighbor, which in turn creates a better neighborhood, and then also many scholars say that people with more opportunity have more to lose, therefore crime should decrease. So we're going to take this stuff here to the next slide, and we're going to share it. And this is what we're doing right now. So we're going to share these findings, what it takes to build a school and how the school impacted the community. Some of these logos below us are some of the organizations that we continuously work with and that we will and are going to share this with in the future. Next slide, please. All right, so contributing to action research and how exactly did this happen? So we created knowledge by creating our own theoretical perspectives on this, our own theoretical models. The participants participated through the whole process. They still participate today. We're going to create change. We're leveraging what we learned to create change for the future. And that change will be seen instead of Belize up there in the top right of the slide, you're going to see Ecuador there next year. So we'll be able to do a better project, a better program next year in Ecuador. And on my last slide right here is what was recommendation for future research? Continue analyzing the data. We got so much, I have so much data that we could probably continue to analyze this for a long time to come, but we need to look at different ways. And also a quantitative research study would be really good to this, to augment the qualitative study, to really show the impact of the new school, and then do a post long-term impact of 3 to 5 years or 5 to 7 years to say, hey, yeah, this school's being used today. These kids have graduated from here, and this is what they did or did not do. So that would be really good. And yeah, thank you for your time. Pending any questions. I know that was really fast, but I got a lot of information. I could be up here for days. So the funding board for the actual construction of the school is Department of Defense.
United States?
Yes,
Oh.
United States Department of Defense underneath a humanitarian assistance project program through the U.S. Embassy in Belize.
Okay, so was there any NGOs or conference?
Us, we're global aid consultants. Me and Mark in front of you, we started a nonprofit, non-government organization. And what we do specifically is we provide the infrastructure to make that school complete. DOD and U.S. Department of State build the building, but that building's empty. There's nothing in it. We come in with our nonprofit and we put in all the chairs, all the desks, the chalkboards, the trash cans, everything it needs to be a school. So the next day the kids can go to class.
Okay, so after y'all go to Ecuador, how do they sustain it?
So when we leave that school, it's already, and we coordinate with the Ministry of Education from that host nation. We're involved with their Ministry of Education. They are down there in those pictures. They are with us every time we're down there. So they sign off that they're going to sustain that school and promote it. They're going to have the teachers for it and pay the electric bill, the utility bills, and all the infrastructure that comes with it. They agree to that.
Okay.
Could you tell a story about how your NGOs or your nonprofit started?
Yeah, so we started in 2016 with Mark Alvarez and myself. We were taking the entrepreneurship. We were in the International Education and Entrepreneurship Program, and we were taking entrepreneurship courses here with Dr. Watkins, international organization courses with Dr. Ortiz. And one of the assignments was to start a business plan. So Mark and myself we wrote the business plan during one of those classes, and we implemented during this time, in 2016. We got it's a 501c3 started then. And since then, almost 6 years, going on 7 years, we've been running an actual non-government organization, 501c3, with as we do. We were through this organization, we've been able to speak to congressmen, both in the House and the Senate, about what we do in Latin America. We have almost not weekly, but biweekly meetings with Southern Command, which is a Department of Defense entity out of Miami. And we also meet with embassy personnel often. And when we travel to the host nation, we always meet with the embassy, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, and any other nonprofit or non-government organizations might be working in that area.
And online, we have a question. Thank you for all you do. I'm curious if COVID 2019 interfered with your research school building process.
Yes, it did. So COVID-19 interfered with both the school building process and the research. And with the main constraint was, well, it closed the airports down. So we weren't allowed to leave. Well, I guess we could leave San Antonio, but we weren't allowed to fly into Belize. But it also stopped the construction because they could get no workers to work, and the funding wasn't even put on hold because of the COVID-19. And then Mark and I were we're doing our dissertation process. I'm not saying it was on hold because we could continue to do plan, act, observe, reflect cycles, but we didn't have a lot of data to do that on. And you might say, hey, well, just use your phone or do a Skype or do a Zoom down there. Well, where they live is very remote. Internet access is not very easily to come by. And if it is, it's very expensive. The computer systems that most people have, they're not up to date. Nothing like we have here. I don't even know if they would be able to use Zoom on their computers if they had internet access. And the phones they use too, they have phones like us, but the phones, they try to hotspot it off of different areas. and because it's so expensive for them. Did that answer your question?
She said, thank you.
You mentioned homicide early on. Was that one of your research questions, and were you able to gather any data about that?
So the reason I mentioned homicide was because of transnational organized crime organizations in that area. The area that we're working in is very dangerous, but it's the responsibility of the United States government for Department of Defense and Department of State to protect us, right? So they're building schools in that area. They have lots of other programs going on too. One of them is to build schools in that area, but that's why they're building schools in that area. And the reason we're there is because they are there.
Okay, so it wasn't one of the research questions.
No, my research question was, or were, what's the impact? How do you feel the school, how do you feel the school affected you? What was the impact on the community of the school, and how can we improve the process?
And is that the part of the longitudinal evaluation after 5 years?
Right, so once we finish this study, it would be good to do another study by maybe somebody like you or whoever wants to volunteer to do another type of study to help further understand it. And it would be best because we finished that school, like, I don't know when, a few months ago. That school is done today, but it would be great. You really need to go back, I think in 3 to 5 years or 5 to 7 years, and then say, hey, yeah, talk to the parents and the local stakeholders that say, yeah, my kid finished the school. He graduated from the school, and look where he is today because he had the opportunity to go to school. Right now we don't have that data or we can't get it, but we can get people are sitting in those chairs you saw and they're going to school today and they're learning something today. But it'd be great to see how that impacted their lives. What kind of opportunities were they introduced to that maybe they wouldn't have been introduced if they weren't able to go to class?
I have one last question.
Absolutely.
It was about your participating category. I noticed that you had Black and Creole. Can you explain that?
So that was just a cultural setting that we were going into. So in that area of Belize, there's Creoles, a lot of Creoles, and a lot of mestizos in that area,
Right.
and also the Mayan. So those. So mestizo would be a Spanish and a Mayan mix, and then a Mayan would be an actual Mayan, and the Creoles would be they come from Africa, or they come from Jamaica or something later. And originally in Belize, it says they came to help with the logging industry there. There's a huge teak wood logging industry under the British control in the late 1800s, maybe even up to the early 1900s.
So they may be African.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know if you realize that the OMP is being evaluated in information category. And so for me, when I get Black, I think of Black American.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that we need to do a better job of delineating these kind of ethnic distinctions because they come with different cultural issues, right? So I was just curious about the Creole.
All right. Well, thank you for your questions. They're great. We're good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But hey, before I go, we got a Global Aid Award for everybody that's here in person, and I'll just go around and pass them out. And these are from 2020, and they represent that's when we started our dissertation process. But if you know what they really are, they're from DSE. That was the year that DSE got canceled.
Thank you, Todd, for your presentation. We're going to take about 3 minutes to set up. We're going to take about 3 to 4 minutes to set up for our closing keynote speaker. Please do not go anywhere. We're going to have our keynote speaker, and we are also going to make some final remarks after her speech. Give us just a moment. We'll be right back on.
Did you catch that online?
Okay.
Hi, how are you? Good, how are you?
You know how much I think that little slow music. Just got it, yeah.
Do you have it on a USB? Okay, and our clicker isn't working, so
I have my own.
Oh.
No, I have.
Did you get a card?
yesterday. but-
How did you?
Yes, I was wondering.
Which one did you get?
How did you feel?
Okay, which one is?
Okay, it's the graduate student, yeah, that
This one?
one. You're on it.
Yeah. Okay, once I get it off, I'll switch it. Save as, and then I'm gonna delete them off once we're all done, so. It won't stay here, I promise.
So I have to like move this way, right? How am I gonna-
Yes,
Okay.
yes, because,
So they won't see me necessarily.
yeah, they have, so if you stand by the podium, you
Oh,
should be,
you have to do like this?
yes, because they need to see you online as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You can see me at the presentation.
They're seated.
They're gonna see both, they're gonna see
Okay.
you and the presentation, but we're recording as well, so
Okay.
there's many layers in play. Yeah. So let me put it up so that way we can test it real quick. 1 second. Okay.
For those of you that are here,
Well, let me-
grab pastries, because I have to carry all that. Take what you want.
This one was yours, right? Yeah. Close that.
Go to the more feature.
Okay. So you want to test it and see if it works for you? Oh, yay.
But to go to more, because I can't stand that floating. Up. And then high floating control is, there you go. One more down. There you go.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, can you test it one more time?
Oh, what happened?
Point it this way to some. To the, because I plugged in, you said it's this thing, right?
Yes, yeah, it's just working.
Yeah, I didn't do anything because I've closed the control. Let me see. Let me, hold on, let me turn. Okay, I'm gonna, do I need to do anything else?
Try unplugging and plugging it in.
That's cool.
My hands off.
This is mine, right?
Yes, the launch. Yeah, this one's your.
That was another. That was only one.
Let me see if I have to do something. Hold on,
Okay, it's going now, but I don't want that floating control. So if you go to other.
We are back. We would, before she comes up, we want to talk a little bit about Dr. Brown and how grateful we are that she is going to close out our graduate research symposium this year. Dr. Brown comes to us receiving her PhD from the University of Georgia. Her educational background includes background in biology, chemistry, and also public administration. She's done many, many, many things, and I'm not going to go into full detail because I would be here all afternoon because that's how wonderful she is. But here at the Dreeben School of Education, she has taught courses in college teaching, adult learning and development, and she has also taught courses in human growth and development in conjunction with Lifespan. So we are very happy that she is here to talk to you a little bit about closing out this session that we entitled The Whole Scholar for this research symposium. Please welcome Dr. Lisa Brown to the podium.
Thank you all. I'm so happy to be here. And I guess the position I kind of took is what happens after your greatness that you can look forward to as graduate students. So I looked at the theme of the symposium and educating the whole scholar for community building and a healthy mind, body, and spirit. So in terms of the agenda I outlined, I want to talk about the UIW mission and why we're here, right? And then why graduate student research is important, the spirit of faculty-student reciprocity, and also where can we go from here?
Lastly, I want to take a futurist perspective, because I'm in futurist organizations, about the whole scholar and how the scholar of today has really become very eclectic in my view. So when we look at UIW's 5 pillars of core values, one of the first being education. And we know in terms of education, the university educates men and women who become concerned with enlightened, I can't see that, becoming enlightened citizens. 2, truth is a priority in terms of the institution. So the faculty and students support one another in the search for communications of truth. The third pillar being faith, right? The university is committed to educational excellence in the context of faith in Jesus Christ, the incarnate Word of God. 4, service. So the curriculum includes a global perspective, and we can see that from some of you all's research, and an emphasis on social justice and community service. And then that 5th pillar being innovation. The university is open to thoughtful innovation that serves the spiritual and material needs of people. So we subconsciously make this a part of our dissertation approach, essentially, because at the University Incarnate Word, those things are prioritized. Now, my area of expertise, if you will, is adult education or adult learning. And a lot of times people wonder, well, what's the difference between K-12 and adult education? It actually is just the fact that adults tend to have more life experiences that inform and serve as key characteristics of how they learn, why they learn, and what they want to learn. So one of the concepts I want to talk about in terms of, your approach or your worldview is this whole concept of power. So what is power? So power is the ability to define an event or term, set narratives, or validate a phenomenon as true. So when you think about yourself as a dissertating student and your research, you really hold a lot of power in what you're sharing with the world by way of your research. Then the other aspect of power is having the corresponding ability to enforce others to accept and operate within those definitions and realities. So while also disregarding or punishing any opposition to its dynamically imposed meaning. So power can be a force for good, or it can in fact be a force for oppression. Now, a lot of times we hear these terms critical thinking, right? The critical thinking is in fact a process. It takes place within the context of academic materials and knowledge creation. So we like critical thinking. We want to encourage critical thinking. It entails an interpretation and analysis of information using evaluation and judgment about a claim to determine its validity and completeness. In essence, we, with critical thinking, are forced to evaluate these assumptions we have using logic. Critical theory is different, and sometimes I think people aren't clear about the distinction. Critical thinking is a process. Critical theory is more of a philosophical orientation or worldview. It has its origins in Marxist thinking, or the Frankfurt School in Germany, and Marxist approaches that require a unremitting critique of social conditions that create unequal power relationships. I talked about power earlier. It challenges the truths advanced by dominant groups, and it seeks the emancipation and the elimination of oppression using praxis. One of our presenters just talked about action research. So a key part of critical theory and its approach to knowledge creation is praxis, which means action and intervention, where we want to impart these notions of social justice, fairness, and equality. So one of the phenomena we're challenged with when we look at notions of critical thinking and critical theory is the whole concept of hegemony. And you hear that word, some people say hegemony, tomato, tomato, but hegemony can impede adults' abilities to think critically. And what is it? It is thinking that assumes something is self-evidently true and acting enthusiastically on that perception, even if it's obvious that common sense things in the world and all around you are working against your better interest. So hegemony is when you embrace an idea enthusiastically, not realizing that the power structure has indoctrinated or sorts you with this idea, which works against your better interest. An example could be that someone might be told to vote a particular political party, but they're not offering any kind of restitution of social justice that is impacting positively in their community. You're told that you always vote this way because your mother did it, your father did it, your grandparents did it, and voting this particular political group has not served your better interest. So that could be an example of hegemony. Now, when you think about critical theories, there are a variety of perspectives. And this was Merriam and Vieira in 2014. Now we're in 2022. And I actually would add some perspectives here. So you have critical feminists. Some people might think it's real. Feminist theory. You have critical race theory. I think that our country has become so pluralistic and diverse, we really should think about critical ethnic theory, right? We have critical queer theory, but we've had a lot of evolution in concepts of gender, so there should be an evaluation of critical gender theory. You also can look at critical HR&D, where you look at human resource and development and the power dynamics there, where oftentimes the managers work in behalf of the organization more so than the individual worker. And that's another situation where you can see hegemony being in place. In any event, I tell my students all the time in my class, this is my mantra. So my goal as a faculty member is to do those things for graduate students I wish were done for me. And so my approach to doing that is to involve them in code-generated knowledge and research. And so I just did a quick year at a glance at some of the kind of things I've been doing. I always encourage my students to do research presentations like you're doing here, but also do them locally, do them statewide, do them nationally. Even if you apply to present at a conference and your proposal isn't accepted, usually there's a peer review process where you get feedback that will help you improve your dissertation proposal. Writing for publication, all of this. Think about presenting one of your chapters to a journal to present for a publication. Depending on what direction you want to go in terms of your career, if you want to go the more academic route, publications are going to be a big part of that. If you're going the practitioner route, it still is a good way to kind of build your academic portfolio, because our position is that even if you're a practitioner, we want you to be a scholarly practitioner. So your information is being grounded in sound epistemology, empiricism. Oftentimes as a practitioner, you might find yourself doing program evaluation, which is very much in the purview of what we have here at UIW and one of our areas of concentration. So writing for publication is something you consider all throughout your graduate school experience. Then mentoring and building relationships. And so these are my day ones. This is Hal McCray and Jeff Neal. And what I typically do in my classes, I ask you nothing. You think about an article. I mean, everybody's like, I'm just trying to get through this class. Come on. On occasion, people say, yeah, sure. So this is my first group of graduate students who decided to trust me. And we ended up getting our proposal accepted at this conference at Columbia University, and they extended to us to publish as well. So one of the things that happens is you get to present with their students. They get to build their confidence and, make networks and relationships with other people. And then you also get a publication. So we are finally in our final phase of this publication. And they sent this to us 2 days before Thanksgiving and said, get it back to us in 2 days. This is some of the frustration you'll deal with. Some kind of mishap where all of our references were messed up. So we literally had to go through the document in 2 days before Thanksgiving, because I had to make sweet potato pie and all that. So this wasn't on my agenda. But I was like, John, he said, well, you see the mistakes. And they all said it was just a hot mess. And me as the lead, it was my responsibility to put it all together, and we did. But I love working with them. And so this is an opportunity, not only they got to present at a national conference, they got to work with me and I could mentor them, and we got a publication. Then we got an invitation to do another one. And so this is my summer session class, History, Philosophy, and Future of Adult Education. Small plug if you're looking for something to do, summer session too. And so our group, as part of what we did, to understand how philosophy and theory speaks to art, we went to the San Antonio Museum of Art. And so it was such a wonderful experience. We had a docent. And again, I extended, hey guys, let's take what we did in this class and turn it into a publication. And fortunately for me, Marissa agreed to do it. And she's here in the classroom today. So we got to revise and resubmit for what we shared with the adult Journal of Adult Learning. So we're going to be busy on the break, but also I'll pull in Lisa. And so she worked with Pam, myself and Jeff to submit to the International Journal for Advanced Corporate Learning. So that manuscript is in peer review. And we talked about the phenomenon of quiet quitting. Have y'all heard of that? Yeah, so you have people who are like kind of withdrawing from the workspace because they feel like, you know, the companies aren't valuing them as much as they used to in the past. You're not retiring with the gold watch, you're retiring with maybe insecure, you know, retirement funding or healthcare and things like that. So it talks about that whole phenomenon of quiet quitting. And Pam comes from the corporate background. So she talks about how they try to kind of do this behaviorist approach to making sure employees get on social media and big up the company. So it's just a really fascinating, you know, phenomenon. And so we were able to submit that and build on our prior article where we talked about spiral dynamic theory informing the way that people respond in those kind of environments and working in teams and groups. So this is the submitted manuscript we have here. We're waiting to have that peer reviewed. And then here's the one me and Marissa have. And so they, the editors came back and said, well, we initially submitted it as a teaching innovation article, but we would really like you to turn it into a full research article. And we was like, okay. So again, working with faculty, colleagues, and graduate students at national conferences, offering national expertise testimony is a part of your future. And so here you have me and Dr. Guzman Foster, and we attended the AAACE conference that was in Milwaukee this year. And so we talked about online civic engagement, political agency, and sustaining communities with informal education. And so here you see the lovely UGA graduate students. So they were there as well. We're like, oh my God, here, let's take pictures. And so I got to know the graduate students that I had not known before here at UIW. And then, you know, here's another opportunity for mentorship and opportunities to, you know, co-author and publish. So these are things that we need to look for. And here we have this young lady, she recently, it's not, oh, I forgot it don't work on this thing. But she graduated from UIW. So here's a recent graduate. Is it Dr. Ann Lee?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. And so another awesome thing you get to do is speak to national issues. And this goes to what I was speaking to about the gentleman who just presented. So the Federal Office of Management and Budget every 25 years reevaluates its categories as it relates to race and ethnicity. And so what they've been doing is holding public hearings, because you can imagine the United States 25 years ago is not the same United States we have now, largely because of immigration. And so some of the more simplistic categories they have, they just don't apply anymore, and they don't take into account unique ethnic experience, in our interest in particular, Black Americans who are descendants of U.S. slaves. So you can't take a person who's straight from Nigeria or Ghana and just think that they're just one big Black ethnic group. We have unique experiences as a direct result of being descendants of U.S. slavery and this political context. And so we are making the case that it's important to reevaluate these things. For one, this project is important because in terms of public administration, achieving fair distribution of government resources to groups is based upon you being able to clearly identify the groups, right? The other thing is obtaining accurate data for change proposals that center social justice and equal reform is important. And so the OMB is the organization who's going to direct the categories the census uses, any federal agency. So these are going to be the ethnic classifications going forward. And so this again is another opportunity for you to do cross-country, collaborations with other scholars. So I'm on Dr. William Verity's National Reparations Planning Committee. He's that dude. And we wrote a grant to the William T. Grant Foundation, got $300,000 to talk about approaches to build coalitions on behalf of advocating for reparation for Black American freedmen who are the descendants of slaves. And that's his wife, Kirsten Mullins. And then that's our genealogist. We're all a part of the subcommittee of this larger committee. But the other beautiful thing is we got a book out of this. So we got to go into the listening session, present to the OMB, and make our case for why it was important to look at these minimum categories and its inadequacies. And then if you're interested, our book is already on for you. So I'm chapter 9, and I'm talking about adult education and civic engagement. I'm really excited about that. And same thing, like when you think you're done, the publishers always come back and ask you another question. So I got asked another question the other day, but fortunately, it wasn't like having to find all my references, it was just one. But that's just the life of, the academia and the scholarly life. But I'm really proud of this work and excited about it. So my takeaways are for you all as emergent scholars and present scholars clearly is participate in scholarly research, writing, and service endeavors on the national, local, and international level. It's going to help you frame, formulate, and strengthen your dissertation work or your master's or graduate work. Also, join these associations because now is the time to join them because it's real cheap for graduate students. So it's like $35 to be in these organizations. It costs hundreds of dollars to be members of. And so again, like I said, if your proposal isn't accepted, at least you get the feedback. So, that's worth having anyway. And then you usually get discounts for the conferences as well. So look into that. And AAAC is a good one. It's only $35 to join that one. So network with UIW faculty in the spirit of reciprocity. For me, as an adult educator, I don't look at my students as these empty vessels I'm pouring into. I'm looking at future colleagues. And so I look for people who are willing to have the confidence and boldness to share with me, to give feedback with me, to write with me. And at the same time, I'm imparting my mentorship and direction. Remember I said at the beginning, my goal was I'm gonna do the stuff for people that people didn't do for me. And that's what motivates me. Lastly, stay healthy, y'all. Stay healthy, grow flowers. I started growing flowers because you have a black thumb. But I started buying flowers and I just started pounding my cheek. And now my flowers are flourishing, even in Texas, but I realized how hot it was and I put them on the patio and they wilted. I thought they were dead. I brought them back in the house and they came back to life. So, you create these spaces within your spaces of light, progress, just good energy. And how I did that was me growing flowers, and now I have a green thumb. So also, take care of your health. Make sure you balance with people. I'm not gonna be able to do that for you. It's a nice way to tell people that. And then also, remember to keep your goal in mind is not to be an eternal student. You eventually want to get up out of here and make your contribution to the world. And I would say something else to you, sometimes people tell graduate students, well, you shouldn't be so aspirational about your, work, you're not going to change the world. I always had a mentality I wanted to change the world. And I feel like the work that I'm doing now has allowed me to do that. So don't have any shame if you have that kind of passion about your research that you want to change and impact the world. Because not only is it something that you might have personally, it's the UIW mission. So the mission is for us to change the world, right? And see justice and fairness among people. And then lastly, reflect on the UIW mission and the 5 core values wherever you go. And let, the institution be proud to say, that's one of ours. Because that's how I felt at the conference when I seen all of y'all there. Y'all really made us proud. And so this is like one of my favorite quotes. It's from Benjamin Franklin. And it's the quintessential adult education quote. Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember. Involve me and I learn. So that's all I have for you all. Thank you for your time. And,
Mr. Brown, on behalf of the DSA, we'd like to thank you for closing out our conference. We'd like to present you with a little something. Please give her another round of applause. We would like to see if you're able and you would like to, if you could please turn on your cameras if you're joining us virtually. The DSA officers would like to recognize Dr. Ashley Love as our faculty sponsor. Dr. Love, thank you very much for your guidance and your support with putting this conference together and allowing us to really take the reins and try some new things this year. We are appreciative of you, especially working long distance and Zooming with us at all kinds of hours. We appreciate you. Let's give all of our presenters this year a round of applause. On behalf of our DSA President, Michelle, and our DSA Vice President, CG, myself and Melinda, our treasurer, we would like to thank all of you for attending the Graduate Research Symposium. We would also like to remind you that we are going to be having multiple events throughout the spring semester, so please keep in contact with us via Facebook, Instagram, or just email us. If you have any thoughts, comments, or ideas, we also would love to hear those. It is a team effort. It is not an individual effort. Also keep in mind that we will be fundraising. So if you tell me you want to help, I will definitely be in contact with you. And most importantly, we want to wish everyone here on behalf of all the DSA officers and of course the Drayton School of Education a very happy holiday season. Wherever you go, we hope that you carry UIW with you and we wish you safe travels during the holiday season. Praise be the incarnate word. Have a great afternoon.